Workers' Day is the most important holiday in Cuba. After 47 years of constant threats from the US and a crippling trade embargo, Cubans don't miss an opportunity to express their defiance. The world's media have been allowed in. Everyone assumes because Fidel Castro will make an appearance. It's been nearly a year since he fell ill, and he hasn't been seen in public since then.
Un pronto restablecimiento y mucha salud, querido compañero Fidel.
But Castro doesn't show. His brother, Raúl, is the interim president, and he's the one that presides over the parade.
¡Viva Fidel! ¡Viva Raúl! ¡Viva Cuba libre! ¡Socialismo a muerte!
Life in Cuba is very tightly controlled. I'm told that not showing up for this parade would attract attention from the informers that watch over every neighborhood. But that doesn't scare everyone. It's technically illegal for Cubans to talk to foreign reporters without official permission. But Pocho has agreed to show me around. He's lived in this tight-knit community just outside Havana all his life. And like millions of Cubans before him, he's desperate to leave. Most Cubans go to the US, but Pocho wants to join his Australian wife in Sydney.
No conozco Australia, me hace falta muchas personas por conocer, no sé, tal vez me guste, tal vez no, pero bueno, intento un poco, ya que amo a mi esposa, me gustaría estar con ella un tiempo.
All the men in the village want to know what they can do to get an Australian bride too.
La suerte que tengo yo.
Así, para que vea el tiburón grande. Ahí está el tiburón, para que vea que tú eres el tipo de machetón.
Gracias, papi.
Padre, mira a ver si hay alguna australiana que me quiere llegar para allá.
Claro, seguro que sí.
Pocho's bedroom is a virtual shrine to his wife Kelly.
Este fue el comienzo de nuestra relación. La relación mía y mi esposa, esto fue en La Habana Vieja. ¿Primer año fue? Eso fue en el principio del 2006. Aquí es cuando Kelly estaba vistiéndose, preparándose para la boda. Estaba en el Hotel Sevilla, en La Habana, en presencia de su padre. Entonces ella está aprendiendo a bailar la salsa con mi padre. Pero bueno, pienso que no van a aprender mucho ella en ese momento porque están muy borrachos. Es imposible convivir con mi esposa aquí, en mi país. Pero no pierdo la esperanza. Sé que pronto estaré con ella allá y voy a ser feliz.
Pocho is not the only one disillusioned with life in Cuba.
The sort of socialist ideal made some sense in a socialist world. It was an alternative project. But to be socialist in the world without socialism, it seems almost preposterous. Actually, it was Mexico. It met Fidel in...
John Brotherton knows Cuba very well. The former head of Spanish and Latin American Studies at the University of New South Wales, he's been visiting Cuba for over 20 years.
This one shows the first work brigade we took there. This is in 1983, if memory serves me right. We actually took more than 60 Australians who paid $2,500 to go and work for the revolution. Those were the days when I found the revolution really inspiring, but really inspiring.
But Sydney-based Brotherton says Cuba has changed for the worse. He says life was great in the 1980s, before the collapse of the Soviet Union, which used to prop up the Cuban economy.
People were living quite well. You could go and buy a chicken if you wanted a chicken. You could buy a bottle of rum if you wanted a bottle of rum, right? You could go to the movies, you could go dancing. It was really, the revolution had really delivered for the vast majority of people. I would often stop and say to myself, John, You know, compare this with Mexico, compare it with Bolivia, compare it with, you know, almost anywhere in Latin America. And if you're an average person, this is where you'd want to be.
Pocho has spent months gathering the documents he needs to get to Australia. I catch up with him as he leaves the immigration office. He was hoping to get official permission to leave Cuba, but it's bad news.
Bueno, ya yo tengo todos mis documentos importantes que necesito tener, entonces la carta de invitación, tengo el pasaporte visado, tengo también el boleto de avión y tengo todo lo que necesito tener para poder viajar, ¿no? Pero dice ellos que tengo que esperar una respuesta del comité militar.
Because Pocho has never done his military service, it will be another few weeks before the authorities decide whether or not to let him leave. He's frustrated by this unexpected setback.
Al turista lo tratan como un rey. Y el cubano es una mierda. ¿Para qué contarte? Los australianos tienen que venir aquí a Cuba a conocer para saber lo que es la verdad aquí. Para que vean que no me da cuenta. Que yo lo aviso. Hasta que no me den la carta de libertad. La carta blanca. La carta de libertad, mejor dicho, la carta de libertad.
Como todos soñábamos que íbamos a construir prácticamente el cielo aquí en Cuba, pero realmente lo que hemos llegado es al infierno. Esa es la realidad triste, ha sido un gran desengaño.
Oscar Chepe is a Cuban dissident who has a real card to freedom. Sentenced to 20 years prison, he was let out because of failing health. But there's a catch.
Hasta que recobre su salud, o sea, quiere decir que yo en cualquier momento puedo regresar a prisión. Trabajé muchos años con el gobierno, fui diplomático, también especialista en problemas de la agricultura cubana. Como la inmensa mayoría de los cubanos, apoyé al gobierno cubano por muchos años, incluso participé cuando era muy niño.
Chepe, an economist, first became disillusioned with Cuba's rigid, state-run system in the 1980s. In 2003, along with 74 other dissidents, he was charged with activities against the integrity and sovereignty of the state. But Chepe says it's Fidel Castro who's betrayed the revolution.
Era preservar el poder absoluto y crear un estado totalitario que no tiene que ver absolutamente nada, incluso con los ideales socialistas. Esto no tiene que ver nada, aquí no hay propiedad social. Aquí lo que hay es un capitalismo de Estado que es dominado por un grupo que es el que dirige todo.
Está aburrido.
No.
Chepe's wife, Miriam, is a founding member of a support group for the dissidents, who are known as the Group of 75. Calling themselves Las Damas de Blanco, or the Ladies in White, they gather at the Santa Rita Church in Havana and call on the government to release the prisoners.
Amén. Santa Rita ruega por todos nosotros y ruega por todos los presos y ruega por el pueblo de Cuba. Amén.
They know that we are going to keep on doing this, but we are very peaceful. We're not a political movement. We're together because we are demanding our rights to have our relatives released free, and what we demand is something very human. It's their liberty and also for them to be treated correctly.
The Ladies in White have come here every Sunday since the arrests 4 years ago. Watched by spies who peer out from behind nearby trees, they march silently up and down the street. It may not look like much, but dissent in Cuba is seldom tolerated, and these women could be arrested at any time.
The very act of convening every week
to make this point is a political act, surely.
Well, okay, it can be seen as a political act, and in fact in Cuba it had never happened before.
On one hand, you're telling me that nobody can talk and be critical, but you are doing all of that very openly with me, knowing full well that the government will see this.
Well, because in 1992 I was a senior official of at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I lost my job because they considered that I was married to a counter-revolutionary. And it was not true. My husband was trying to improve and help the country. And this is the only thing we can do, express ourselves, defend our right of expression and our human rights in general. And if they come and take us to prison, well, we have no other choice.
Last year at the United Nations, the Australian government raised concerns about the lack of democracy and freedom in Cuba.
A una casa cuando tienes tejado de vidrio, realmente es desafortunado para el pueblo australiano, que tiene tantos valores, que es un pueblo muy querido por el pueblo cubano y que es un pueblo honesto. Saber que su gobierno se presta para apoyar al gobierno norteamericano.
Pero será verdad lo que han dicho, que aquí hay abuso de derechos humanos, porque lo han dicho así, ¿no?
Yo invito, todo el que me dice que hay abuso de derechos humanos, yo le digo, vengan a Cuba y comprueben.
Unfortunately, this is difficult. Amnesty International has not been allowed to visit Cuba for almost 20 years. The Cuban government dismisses the dissidents as nothing more than paid American stooges.
Todos sabemos, en mi barrio, en mi zona, vive uno que la conozco desde que era niña. Es una persona que recibe $100 todos los meses de la embajada de Estados Unidos, y con esos $100 compra su...
¿Y cómo sabe esto?
Pues claro, todo el mundo lo sabe.
They should be very much ashamed of saying that we are bought for $100.
Yeah, the government used this lie to defend them, because they lost all their ideology. They don't have nothing now.
According to longtime Cuba watcher John Brotherton, the dissidents and las damas de blanco are brave but ineffectual.
Well, they're seen as almost as a sort of sect, I think. That's how they're portrayed, right? There's a sort of little group of troublemakers, right, who are opposed to Fidel, and of course that's the great crime in Cuba, being opposed to Fidel. And the price for joining them or supporting them is very, very high. And it's a higher price, I think, than the vast majority of Cubans are prepared to pay.
Sanga, buroboya.
Not all young Cubans are disaffected and desperate to leave. These are some of the 40,000 strong trabajadores sociales, or social workers, that Castro has enlisted to ensure the future of the revolution. Today they're handing out long-lasting light bulbs and replacing old, energy-inefficient household appliances.
Estos son los refrigeradores, a lo que le llamamos artefactos, porque son los que consumen demasiada energía eléctrica, los que llevan al país a la ruina con este gasto de combustible.
Castro's Green Army has already handed out 9.4 million fluorescent light bulbs. Now they want people to change their old fridges. They have to pay, but it can be paid off on a plan over many years.
Es una nueva revolución, una revolución energética. Se trata sencillamente de implementar con acciones concretas y con acciones prácticas todo lo que el comandante jefe ha estado hablando y ha estado explicando incluso en sus últimos artículos.
Sí, aquí nadie está obligado a cambiar su refrigerador.
El que quiera cambiar.
El que quiera lo cambia. Lo que pasa es que todo el mundo tiene sangre revolucionaria en las venas. Y es lógico que, por supuesto, se unan al plan que está pidiendo la revolución. La revolución hoy lo que necesita es ahorrar energía.
When faced with a foreign journalist, Cubans know what the right answers are. A lot of Cubans are revolutionary. But if you look at them in their day-to-day life, right, and particularly the people who are sort of, I suppose, economically marginalised, which is a huge number of people, right, they are discontent.
Everything depends on what you say or what you do. For instance, your only employer in Cuba is the government, the state. So if you want to have a job, you have to, work by their rules. If you want your son to go to a university, they say the university are for revolutionaries, so they won't get a place there at the university, and so on. So in Cuba, repression is personalized.
This family was given its energy-efficient pressure cooker, fans and light bulbs when the program was first started. And now they're getting their fridge.
El manual de uso del refrigerador trae además para hacer hielito en el congelador. Se quita aquí.
Meanwhile, Pocho is at a neighbour's house waiting for Kelly to call, so he can explain that his departure has been delayed. He doesn't have a phone and can't afford to make a call himself.
Vamos Kelly, llama por favor. Necesito conversar contigo. Esto me desespera, ¿sabes?
When she calls, it's clear this is not the news she wanted to hear.
No te pongas triste, ya estás llorando. Te siento que estás llorando. ¿Por qué tú lloras? Yo también te extraño. Chao. Ya que no quiero escucharte más triste. Te amo por siempre. Ese tremendo sol.
Pocho now has time to kill. To take his mind off the frustration of dealing with Cuba's bureaucracy, Pocho, a singer, plays a song he's written especially for Kelly.
En la conspiración del este, DJ este, son 8 a my crazy love for you, my star, I miss you baby forever. Lo que ha pasado, yo he pasado por muchas cosas malas hoy no, y durante todo este tiempo que he tenido que estar haciendo papeles, ¿entiendes? Para poder estar al lado de mi esposa. Ya tú sabes cómo son las cosas y tú sabes cómo ya es la vida, tú que la estás viviendo aquí, la vida aquí en Cuba. Lo difícil que es aunque uno esté casado, no le importa nada a ellos, no importa lo que sufra, no le importa los sentimientos de las otras personas. Hoy estoy un poco cansado, triste. Pregúntale al dedo así para también al salado. Cuando llego a la... Pero bueno, tengo que cantar para poder relajarme un poco y sentirme un poco mejor y... ¡Pum! Ahora tú sabes que nosotros vamos a...
If you don't have the right communist pedigree, it can be hard to make ends meet here. Once with Soviet support, Cuba was the land of plenty, but these days it's struggling to feed its people.
Hola, normal. ¿Está vendiendo estos zapatos? 25 pesos. ¿Para fumar fiesta o para qué?
No, para comer. ¿Sabes? Aquí todo lo que buscamos para comer. Mira, y mediecitas de niño. Así como la realidad cubana.
Claro. Pero tan bueno, esta parte, tan duro.
Sí, Tommy Hill.
Although small-scale business is often tolerated, under Cuba's state-controlled economy, the people selling these items are essentially breaking the law.
¿Cuánto vale el limón mío? ¿Eh? ¿Cómo es 20? 4. Sí.
Pero todo está prohibido. No hay aliciente no hay posibilidades que la gente pueda tener decisiones propias. Los cubanos no podemos tener negocios prácticamente. Aquí pueden tener negocios los extranjeros, nosotros no. Aquí nosotros no podemos ni alojarnos en los hoteles, porque eso nada más que es para extranjeros, ni aún con divisa. Nosotros no tenemos acceso a internet, está prohibido para los cubanos, solamente se les permite a los clientes del gobierno, a algunos intelectuales que el gobierno quiere, pero eso está prohibido.
Universal health care and education are the undeniable success stories of the Cuban Revolution. There are few countries in the developing world which can offer free schooling and medical treatment to all. For the very young, it's small classes and good teachers. But as the students get older, it seems the indoctrination kicks in.
Tranquilo, mi comandante, que aquí hay un pueblo aguerrido y aunque quieran destruirnos, eso jamás han podido. Puede sentirse tranquilo, no tener preocupación, que el pueblo se encuentra alerta ante cualquier agresión. Hoy se está recuperando de una gran operación. Tranquilo, mi comandante, que todo el pueblo de Cuba cuida la revolución. Los pioneros te admiramos por valiente y solidario. Por tu amor a nuestro pueblo, muchos besos te enviamos en tu 80 aniversario. Estamos en nuestras escuelas con todos nuestros programas. Pronta recuperación de su pueblo que lo ama. Tranquilo, mi comandante, tranquilo.
Perhaps a poem worked, because Castro's health did improve.
También se ha producido otra cosa, varios cambios.
After almost a year out of the public eye, last month he appeared on state TV, looking much stronger. Miriam Leiva says that when he first got sick, people whispered their hopes to her.
They would tell you, no, soon the transportation will be better. Soon we will have better wages. Since months have passed, and what you only see is that sometimes they speak that Fidel Castro is coming back, that his health is improving, but nobody sees him, and what he talks about is nothing that has to do with the real situation of the country. People are losing their hopes.
Dice Kelly que en Australia hay unos camarones grandísimos. Estoy loco por llegar para probarlo. El primer plato que me voy a comer en Australia va a ser de camarones australianos. Porque por lo menos puedo comprármelo. Aquí tú trabajas y no te compras nada. Tú trabajas un mes y si vas a comerte un plato de camarón en un mes no te alcanza. No te lo puedes comer. Entonces, mire.
If I didn't know Cuba so intimately well, it would be really nice for me to still believe in the dream. And I sort of regret, I have to say, I'm saddened by what I know, because I sort of rather would not know it. It would be much easier for me to still be a true believer, right, and to think things were wondrous in the garden, but they just aren't. And it's sad that they aren't, because the project was a wonderful project.
The tragedy for Cuba is that years of repression and economic stagnation mean that many of its youth want to be elsewhere. And for Kelly's husband, Pocho, the dream has finally come true.
Tú sabes que yo no miro desde Socialist de Cuba. ¿Sí? Sí, como 8 horas nada más.
No importa, el problema es lo lejos que está esto, está lejísimo. Sí. No, y había un niño ahí al lado mío, no me dejaba dormir. Y llorando el niño, pero no importa, veo, por amor se hace todo. Ya estoy aquí, ahí, ¿qué vamos a hacer ya?